Have you ever wondered why some men over 50 lose sensitivity so quickly, while others stay responsive, firm, and confident for years longer, I ask? Because nearly every week, a man sits in front of me, frustrated, embarrassed, sometimes even scared, telling me the same story. I feel myself fading. Something isn't working the way it used to, and what worries me isn't just the problem itself. It's how silently it creeps up on them. Over the years, I've watched men blame stress, aging, or even their partners, when in reality, the issue was happening much deeper at the level of the tissue itself. The skin becoming thinner, the nerves firing more weakly, the blood flow losing its sharp response, small changes that seem harmless at first, but slowly, quietly start rewriting a man's entire intimate experience. And here's the part that most men learn far too late. None of this has to be permanent, because the same tissue that weakens over time can also be nourished, repaired, and reawakened if you know what to use and how to use it. That's where natural oils come in, and why so many of my patients experienced breakthroughs they never thought possible. Before we go any further, let me give you a small warning. Once you understand what's actually happening inside the skin and blood vessels, you may realize that you've been unintentionally damaging yourself for years. But stay with me, because just a few minutes from now, you're going to see how simple it can be to reverse that damage, and why the right oil used the right way can completely change your experience. If you're a man over 50, what I'm about to reveal could be the single most important thing you hear about your intimate health this year, so don't look away. This next part is where everything begins to make sense. You know, the first thing I notice when men over 50 walk into my office isn't their lab results, it's the look in their eyes. That quiet mix of confusion and fear, as if their own body has started sending signals they can't quite interpret anymore. And almost every time the story begins the same way, I don't understand why everything feels different down there. It happened so slowly, I didn't even realize it was changing. But the truth is, those changes never happen overnight. They build quietly, layer by layer, inside the skin, the nerves, and the blood vessels. I often explain it to my patients like this. Imagine the skin of the penis as a protective glove. In your 30s, that glove is thick, smooth, elastic, and well-oiled. But by your 50s, that same glove starts acting more like dry paper thinner, more fragile, far less forgiving. And once that happens, friction doesn't just feel different. It starts leaving tiny injuries behind. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say tiny. These micro tears are so small you'd never see them, but over months and years, they build up. That's why men tell me things like, it just doesn't feel as sharp, or I lose sensitivity so much faster than before. It's not in their head. It's physiology, it's aging, and it's the slow decline of natural oils, nearly a 40% drop after age 50, according to dermatological studies. When your skin stops lubricating itself, every single session becomes a little harsher, a little more damaging, and a little harder to recover from afterward. And it doesn't stop at the skin. The nerves underneath the ones responsible for sensitivity are like tiny electrical wires with enough repeated irritation. Even mild irritation, those wires start sending weaker signals. I've had patients describe it as feeling like a muted version of myself. And honestly, that's one of the hardest things for men to admit, because it strikes at the core of their confidence. But here's where things get even more important. When the endothelial lining inside the blood vessels begins to stiffen with age, it stops behaving like a responsive valve and starts acting more like a rusty hinge. It doesn't open as quickly. It doesn't stay open as long. This is why firmness becomes harder to maintain, even when desire is still there. And when you combine weaker nerves, thinner skin, and slower blood flow, that's the perfect storm most men don't see coming until it's already affecting their daily life. But don't let this overwhelm you, because this is exactly the point where things start to shift. Because once you understand what's actually changing, you can finally understand what truly helps. And trust me, the solution isn't more friction, more pressure, or more trying harder. It's something far simpler and far more effective, something that protects the tissue instead of damaging it, something that nourishes rather than depletes. And this is exactly why the next part matters even more than the problem itself, because the solution you're about to hear is what has changed the experience for hundreds of my patients. You'll want to stay with me for this next section, because this is where things finally start turning in your favor. And once men finally understand that the real problem begins with thinning skin, slower nerves, and less responsive blood vessels, there's one question they always ask me next. So, shouldn't I just use more lube? It's a fair question. It sounds logical. It even sounds responsible. But this is where I usually take a deep breath, look them in the eye, and tell them something they're not expecting. Most commercial lubricants do not protect aging tissue. Many actually make the problem worse. And when I say that, I can almost feel the shock hit them. Here's why. Commercial lubes are designed for one thing, short-term slickness, nothing more. They sit on the surface, they feel smooth for a moment, and then they evaporate, leaving the skin just as vulnerable as before, sometimes drier. And that dryness becomes a trap, because every time the lubrication disappears, friction becomes harsher, the skin micro tears faster, and the nerves take another hit. It's the exact opposite of what men over 50 actually need, but it gets more concerning. When I started reviewing the formulation of many popular lubricants, I noticed a pattern that bothered me: glycerin, parabens, propylene glycol, and a long list of chemical agents that dermatologists have repeatedly linked to irritation, especially on aging or sensitive skin. Several urology journals have even published warnings that repeated exposure to these compounds increases inflammation in delicate tissue. And inflammation, even mild inflammation, is one of the biggest killers of sensitivity. I've lost count of how many patients told me I thought it was just me getting older, when in reality, their lubricant was quietly irritating the very area they were trying to protect. It's like trying to put out a fire using gasoline. You don't notice the damage immediately, but the consequences stack up fast. And this is where the science gets even more interesting. Water-based lubes, the most common kind, actually pull moisture out of the skin through a process called osmotic imbalance. So instead of hydrating, they leave the tissue more dehydrated afterward. And when the skin becomes dehydrated, those micro tears I mentioned earlier, they multiply. That's why so many men tell me things feel slightly numb or a little raw the day after. That's not aging. That's chemical irritation combined with moisture loss. But here's the part that surprises most men the most, even the natural-looking commercial lubes. The ones with green labels and words like gentle, organic, or sensitive skin often include the same harsh ingredients. The branding is clean, the bottle looks healthy, but the chemistry tells a very different story. I've read enough ingredient labels to know that marketing rarely tells the truth. And I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying lubricants are bad. I'm saying the wrong lubricants slowly sabotage the health of tissue that's already aging and already struggling. Men over 50 don't need something slippery. They need something restorative, something protective, something that works with the biology of aging skin, not against it. And that's exactly where natural oils come in. But before I explain why they outperform commercial products almost every time, there's one more piece you absolutely need to hear, because it's the key that unlocks why natural oils work so well. Stay with me, because the next part is where the entire picture finally clicks together. And this brings me to a turning point that most men never see coming. Once they understand why commercial lubes fail and how they quietly damage aging tissue, the next question naturally appears. Then what actually works? And this is where natural oils completely change the story, because unlike commercial lubricants that sit on top of the skin like a plastic wrap, natural oils do something far more important. They interact with the tissue itself. They blend with the outer layers of the skin, soften them, nourish them, and actually reinforce the barrier that time has slowly worn down. It's the difference between covering a crack with tape and repairing the foundation underneath. To explain why this matters so much, I always tell my patients to think of penile skin like a sponge. A dry sponge becomes rough, fragile, and easy to tear. But a hydrated sponge, it bends, flexes, absorbs shock, and maintains its structure even under pressure. Aging skin behaves the same way. When it loses oil, it loses flexibility. When it loses flexibility, friction becomes damage. But when you reintroduce the right oils, the ones that mimic what the skin used to produce naturally, you restore that sponge-like resilience. And the research supports this. Dermatology studies show that oils rich in fatty acids and vitamin E increase skin hydration by up to 56%, improve elasticity, and reduce inflammation markers. That means fewer micro tears, fewer irritated nerves, and a stronger protective layer overall. This isn't hype. This is physiology responding to nourishment the way it's designed to. But there's something even more fascinating, something I didn't fully appreciate until I saw it repeatedly in my patients. Natural oils don't just moisturize, they actually improve microcirculation. When the tissue softens and relaxes, blood flows more freely through the tiny vessels beneath the skin. Think of it like unclogging a narrow pipe. Once the pressure eases, everything moves better. And because firmness depends heavily on blood flow responsiveness, this seemingly small change becomes a game changer. Another thing men love but rarely expect is that oils last much longer than commercial lubes, especially during extended activity. While commercial products evaporate or turn sticky, oils warm up, melt into the skin, and create a smooth glide that doesn't suddenly disappear. And that alone prevents so much unnecessary irritation. But what I appreciate most about natural oils is how bio-friendly they are. Your skin recognizes them, it doesn't fight them, it doesn't get inflamed, it doesn't react the way it reacts with chemical-based products. Instead, it absorbs the nutrients, vitamin E, omega, fatty acids, antioxidants, and uses them to repair what time has worn down. And this is why when men switch to natural oils, they often tell me things like, "I didn't know I could feel this again," or "It feels different," in a good way. Their sensitivity improves, their comfort improves, and their recovery improves because the skin is finally being treated like a living organ, not a mechanical surface. And here's the part most men never expect. Not all oils are equal. Some repair nerves better, some boost circulation more, some protect the skin more deeply. And knowing which oil matches which issue is the key to getting real noticeable results, which is why the next section is absolutely crucial, because I'm about to show you the oils that consistently made the biggest difference for my patients. And trust me, the first one on the list surprises almost everyone. And this is exactly why when men ask me where to start, I almost always begin with the same answer: coconut oil. Not because it's trendy, not because it's popular, but because after more than a decade treating male patients, it's the one oil that consistently delivers results across almost every category: skin protection, sensitivity, blood flow, comfort, and long-term tissue health. What makes coconut oil so powerful isn't just the texture or smoothness, it's the chemistry. Virgin, unrefined coconut oil contains lauric acid, caprylic acid, and a surprisingly high amount of natural vitamin E. These compounds don't just sit on the skin, they interact with it. They melt at body temperature, slip into the outer layers, and strengthen the tissue in a way most men have never experienced before. I often tell my patients to imagine coconut oil as a guardian layer. Lauric acid acts like a natural antimicrobial shield, an incredibly important benefit for men who deal with irritation, redness, or moisture issues. Many uncircumcised patients in particular have told me coconut oil was the first thing that made their skin feel calm instead of reactive. And when irritated skin finally gets a break, sensitivity begins to return. But here's where coconut oil becomes even more interesting. The medium-chain triglycerides, the MCTs you hear about in nutrition, are absorbed through the skin and can actually improve local microcirculation. I've had men tell me almost in disbelief, I felt firmer, longer, and while not every anecdote is a scientific study, there's enough consistency over years of clinical observation that I can tell you this aging tissue responds extremely well to improved circulation, even in small amounts. And because coconut oil contains natural vitamin E, it quietly works in the background, repairing dryness, strengthening elasticity, and supporting tissue recovery between sessions. I've seen men in their late 50s regain sensitivity they thought they had lost permanently simply because their skin was finally getting the nourishment it needed to function. Now, does it solve everything instantly? No, but when men use it consistently, especially those who struggle with dryness or irritation, the difference over a few weeks can be incredibly noticeable. One of my patients, a 63-year-old man who had been dealing with chronic dryness for nearly a decade, told me, "This feels like my skin woke back up after years of sleep." And honestly, that's a common pattern. Of course, no oil is perfect. Coconut oil is comedogenic, which means it can clog pores if it spreads onto hair-bearing skin. I always remind patients to keep it focused on the shaft and glands, especially if they're prone to ingrown hairs. But when used correctly, its benefits overwhelmingly outweigh the drawbacks for most aging men. And here's the part that surprises people every time: coconut oil isn't even the best option for sensitivity. It's excellent, don't get me wrong. But the oil that truly transforms nerve responsiveness, the one I recommend to men who feel numb or muted, is something completely different and far more targeted, because the next oil on this list has a special ability to repair nerve pathways in a way coconut oil simply can't. And that's where things really start to shift. Stay with me, because if sensitivity is your concern, the next oil is the one you absolutely need to hear about. And this is where things become truly exciting, because if coconut oil is the all-around protector suite, almond oil is the specialist. Whenever a patient sits across from me and tells me I feel dull, muted, it's like the sensation is there, but not really there. This is the oil I reach for first. Not because it's trendy, not because it smells nice, but because it targets the exact biological weak points that aging quietly erodes the nerves. You see, the nerves responsible for sensation in the male anatomy are incredibly delicate, thin branching fibers that behave almost like high-precision wires. Years of friction, dryness, irritation, and micro-injuries don't destroy them outright, but they dull them. They fire more slowly, more weakly, and the brain interprets that as reduced pleasure. That's why so many men over 50 describe the same feeling. I can feel something, but it's like someone turned the volume down. What makes sweet almond oil so different is that it doesn't just soothe the skin, it nourishes those nerves directly. It's packed with vitamin E, but more importantly, it contains B vitamins like riboflavin and niacin. These aren't just nutrients, they're nerve repair agents. Dermatology research has shown that B vitamin complexes can support the regeneration of damaged nerve endings and improve the speed at which signals travel. That's the scientific explanation behind why so many of my patients report sharper, more vivid sensation after a few weeks of consistent use. And beyond the nerves, almond oil brings something else to the table that men rarely expect: deep inflammation control. I've seen this repeatedly. Men who felt numb or less responsive weren't always losing sensitivity because of age. Many were experiencing low-grade inflammation from years of friction or chemical lubes. Almond oil's omega-3 content helps calm that inflammation at a cellular level, giving those nerve pathways the breathing room they need to recover. But the first thing, men always notice the texture. Almond oil has what I like to call the Goldilocks glide. Not too heavy, not too thin, easy to spread and slow to dry. Most patients tell me it feels natural, like something the body recognizes rather than fights against. And because it absorbs gradually, it continues feeding the tissue long after you've applied it. Of course, I always remind patients to do a quick patch test, especially if they have nut allergies. But for the overwhelming majority of men, almond oil becomes the missing link they didn't know they needed. I'll never forget one patient in particular, a 57-year-old man who told me sensitivity had been declining for nearly a decade. He tried medications, supplements, endless commercial products, nothing helped. But after 3 weeks of using almond oil consistently, he looked at me with this astonished expression and said, "I didn't realize how much I'd lost until it started coming back." And his experience wasn't rare. It happens far more often than you'd imagine. But here's where things get even more interesting. While almond oil is incredibly effective for nerve health and sensitivity, there's another oil that works on a completely different but equally important system: blood flow. And for men who struggle with firmness, staying power, or that frustrating feeling of fading too fast, the next oil often becomes the real breakthrough. Stay with me, because the next one on the list is the oil that directly supports vascular strength, and it's the one most men are shocked to discover actually works. And once we've restored sensitivity with almond oil, the next question almost always appears: what about firmness? What about staying power? I hear this from men constantly, because for many of them, the real struggle isn't desire. It's the frustrating feeling of fading too fast, as if the body can't keep up with the mind anymore. And whenever firmness becomes the concern, this is the oil I turn to: grapeseed oil. What makes grapeseed oil so special is that it targets the exact system aging often weakens: first, vascular responsiveness. As men get older, the endothelial lining inside the vessels becomes less flexible, less reactive. It's like comparing a brand new garden hose to an old one that's been sitting out in the sun. The old hose still works, but it doesn't expand the way it used to. Blood vessels behave in a very similar way. And when those vessels don't open fully or quickly, enough firmness becomes difficult to maintain. This is where grapeseed oil does something no other oil on this list can do. As powerfully, it strengthens those tiny vessels. It contains compounds called proanthocyanidins, potent antioxidants shown in vascular research to improve endothelial function, increase nitric oxide availability, and actually reinforce the walls of capillaries. And when the capillaries under the penile skin strengthen, blood flow becomes more stable, more reliable, and more responsive. I've seen this repeatedly in my patients. Men who felt like they were losing their edge start reporting better firmness and longer endurance simply because their tissue was finally supported instead of strained. And what surprises them most is how light grapeseed oil feels. It's thinner than coconut oil, absorbs faster than almond oil, and creates a silky glide that feels clean and non-greasy. Many men describe it as the least noticeable but most effective oil because the sensation feels natural, not artificial. But there's another hidden benefit I love pointing out. Grapeseed oil helps balance sebum production. That means if the skin in that area tends to be too dry, it hydrates it. If it tends to be too oily, it regulates it. That balance reduces irritation, reduces redness, and creates a healthier environment for blood flow to do its job. One of my patients, a 61-year-old man who struggled for years with staying firm, told me something that stuck with me. It wasn't that I couldn't get there, I just couldn't stay there. And after a month of using grapeseed oil regularly, he returned with a completely different energy in his voice. It feels like the blood actually wants to stay now, he said. And the truth is, he was right. Because when vessels become more responsive, they hold pressure more effectively, and that makes all the difference. Of course, grapeseed oil absorbs a bit faster than heavier oils, which means some men need to reapply during longer activity. I always tell them to keep a small bottle nearby. It's a simple habit that prevents unnecessary friction and gives the tissue exactly what it needs, exactly when it needs it. But here's where things get even more important. While grapeseed oil is phenomenal for circulation and firmness, it's not the best for men with extremely dry skin or tissue that feels thin, fragile, or easily irritated. For those men, the next oil, the one that behaves almost exactly like the body's own natural lubrication, often becomes the real breakthrough. Because the next oil doesn't just support the tissue, it helps regulate it. And for men over 50, regulation can be the difference between ongoing irritation and long-term comfort. And this brings us to one of the oils I consider the most underrated of them all, jojoba oil. If coconut oil is the protector and almond oil is the nerve healer and grapeseed oil is the circulation booster, then jojoba oil is what I call the regulator. It does something no other oil on this list can do. It behaves almost exactly like the natural lubrication your skin used to produce effortlessly in your 20s and 30s. I can't tell you how many men have sat across from me frustrated because their skin feels either too dry and tight or too oily and irritated, and sometimes bizarrely, both in the same week. And when that imbalance starts, the tissue becomes unpredictable. One day, everything feels fine. The next day, it feels sensitive, raw, or reactive. That inconsistency alone can chip away at confidence. But this is where jojoba oil becomes a quiet miracle. It's not technically even an oil. It's a wax ester structured almost identically to human sebum. That means your skin doesn't treat it like a foreign substance. It treats it like its own. And when the skin recognizes something as natural, it responds with balance rather than resistance. What I love most about jojoba oil is how intelligently the skin interacts with it. If the tissue is too dry, jojoba gives it moisture. If the tissue is too oily, jojoba signals the skin to ease back on oil production. It's like giving the skin a reset button, something aging tissue desperately needs but rarely gets. And scientifically, this makes perfect sense. Jojoba oil contains vitamin E B complex, vitamins zinc and copper, all essential for maintaining elasticity, supporting nerve function, and repairing micro-irritations. I've seen men with chronic irritation, redness, or sensitivity finally get relief after switching to jojoba because the tissue finally stopped feeling attacked and started feeling supported. One patient of mine, a 59-year-old man who had struggled for years with irritation from both commercial products and heavier oils, told me something that perfectly describes jojoba's effect. It feels like my skin finally exhaled. And that's exactly what jojoba does. It relieves tension in the tissue. It creates a smooth, non-sticky glide that doesn't dry out and doesn't clog pores. And unlike many oils that oxidize quickly, jojoba is exceptionally stable. It can sit on a nightstand for months without going rancid, which is another reason I recommend it for men with sensitive skin. But the real beauty of jojoba is how long it lasts, because it doesn't evaporate like water-based lubes, and it doesn't soak in too quickly like lighter oils. It provides consistent lubrication without sudden dryness. That consistency prevents micro tears, reduces irritation, and gives the tissue a chance to function comfortably again. This is why men who feel fragile or who describe their skin as thin, reactive, or easily irritated often experience their biggest improvements with jojoba oil. It gives the skin exactly what it lacks, nothing more, nothing less. And that balance is what produces long-term comfort. But as powerful as jojoba oil is for restoring balance, there's one more oil that sits at the top of this list, an oil that brings a luxury level form of nourishment and repair, especially for men whose skin has already experienced significant thinning or aging. It's richer, deeper, and far more restorative than any of the others. And for many men over 50, it becomes the turning point, because the next oil isn't just helpful, it's transformational. And it's the closest thing I've seen to restoring youthful resilience in aging, intimate tissue. And this brings me to the final oil, the one I recommend, when a patient's tissue needs more than support, it needs restoration. Because while coconut oil protects almond oil, awakens sensitivity, grapeseed oil boosts circulation, and jojoba brings balance, argan oil repairs, truly repairs, deeply, consistently, and often in ways that surprise even the men using it. I turn to argan oil when the skin has reached a point where it feels thinner, more delicate, or simply aged. Men usually describe it to me with phrases like, "It feels fragile," or "It doesn't bounce back like it used to." And that makes sense because after 50, collagen production drops sharply, elasticity declines, hydration becomes harder to maintain, tissue recovery slows dramatically. What once healed overnight now takes days. Argan oil steps in exactly where time pulls away. It contains exceptionally high levels of vitamin E, but more importantly, it contains a compound called squalene, one of the closest matches to the natural lipids your skin produced in your younger years. Squalene doesn't just soften tissue, it helps restore elasticity. It supports the skin's ability to stretch and recoil without feeling strained or irritated. And then there's ferulic acid, another star component. Research in dermatology journals shows that ferulic acid can improve endothelial function and protect delicate blood vessels from oxidative damage. And for aging tissue, stronger vessels mean stronger support, better nutrient delivery, and better responsiveness overall. What makes argan oil feel so different is how luxuriously it absorbs. It's rich without being heavy, nourishing without clogging. It melts into the tissue instead of sitting on top, leaving behind a silky comfort that lasts. Many of my patients tell me it gives them a sensation they hadn't felt in years, a kind of suppleness that feels youthful, resilient, and stable. I remember a 65-year-old patient vividly. He'd been dealing with dryness and thinning for so long that he assumed it was just part of aging he had to accept. But within a few weeks of using argan oil consistently, his tone changed. It feels healthier, he told me. Not just softer, healthier. And he was right. Because improving elasticity, moisture, retention, and vascular support doesn't just feel better, it is better. Of course, I always remind men to choose pure organic argan oil, not the diluted blends sold in cosmetic bottles. The real benefits come from the unrefined product, the one that still carries all the natural compounds your skin actually needs. But here's the interesting truth. You don't need all 5 oils. You don't even need 3. You just need the right one for your specific issue. And once you identify that, everything shifts. Sensitivity increases, comfort returns, recovery improves, and tissue that felt old starts behaving younger again. But knowing which oil to pick is only half the equation. The real magic happens in how you use it, and using it incorrectly can cut the benefits in half. The next section is where I explain exactly how to apply these oils for maximum absorption, maximum protection, and maximum results. This part is crucial. Don't skip it. And now that you've seen what each oil can do, here's the part most men completely overlook, and it's exactly why many of them fail to get results. They pick oils the way they pick shampoo. Randomly, they grab whatever bottle is closest, whatever someone online mentioned or whatever sounded natural enough. But male intimate tissue doesn't work that way. Aging skin doesn't respond to guesswork. And if you don't match the oil to the actual problem, you'll get only half the benefits or none at all. Then this is why when I guide my patients, I never start with the oil. I start with the symptom. What is the real frustration? What's the thing that bothers them the most? What has actually changed after 50? Because the right oil isn't about preference. It's about precision. So here's how I break it down in my clinic in plain language. Men understand instantly. If a man tells me I just need general protection, something that feels good and keeps the tissue healthy, I point him to coconut oil. It's the all-around defender, the one that shields, softens, lubricates, and protects without complicating things. But if the problem is I can't feel as much as I used to, or everything feels dull, that tells me the nerves need support, and that's when sweet almond oil becomes the first choice. It's designed, biologically speaking, to feed nerve endings and bring sensation back online. When a man says, I can get firm, but I can't stay firm, or I fade too fast, that is a blood flow issue, plain and simple, and that's where grapeseed oil becomes the game changer. Men don't expect an oil to help with firmness until it does. If someone tells me my skin feels unpredictable, sometimes dry, sometimes irritated, I know the issue is imbalance, not damage. And jojoba oil fixes imbalance better than anything else because it communicates directly with the skin's natural oil production signals. And then there are the men who walk in saying, my skin feels thin, fragile, older. Those are the men who benefit most from argan oil, the deepest, most restorative oil on this list. And here's something important. I always emphasize, you don't need 3 oils. You don't need 5. You need 1, your oil. The oil that matches your biggest issue. The oil that fixes the root, not the symptom. The oil that aligns with what your skin is actually struggling with after 50. When men get this right, everything changes. Sensitivity improves, comfort improves, recovery improves, even confidence improves because suddenly They're not fighting their body anymore. They're supporting it. But knowing which oil to use is only the first half of the equation. The second half, the part almost nobody tells men, is how to use it correctly. Because if you use these oils the wrong way or at the wrong time or in the wrong amount, you'll miss the most powerful benefits they offer. And this next part matters more than anything I've said so far, because using these oils the right way can literally double their effectiveness. Don't miss this. And this is where everything finally comes together, because even the perfect oil won't work if you use it the wrong way. I can't tell you how many men walk into my clinic frustrated, disappointed, even convinced nothing can help them, only to realize they weren't applying the oil in a way their skin could actually benefit from. And when they fix their technique, the results change dramatically. Comfort increases, sensitivity returns, and the tissue finally responds the way it's supposed to. The first thing I teach every patient is this: don't rush the application. Aging skin doesn't absorb anything effectively when it's cold, tense, or tie-dry. That's why I always tell men to warm the oil between their palms first. It only takes 5 seconds, but it makes a huge difference. Warm oil spreads more evenly, absorbs faster, and softens the tissue immediately. I've had patients tell me it felt like the skin woke up the moment the warmth touched it. Then comes the amount. Another place men go wrong. Most men either use way too much or way too little. They dump oil into their hands and hope for the best, or they barely use enough to coat the surface. Neither approach works. I always recommend starting with half a teaspoon, just enough to glide, but not so much that everything becomes slippery and numb. You can add more later if you need it. What matters is controlled, intentional application. And here's something men rarely think about: timing. If you apply the oil right before activity, you're only getting surface level benefits. But when you apply it 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, the upper layers of the skin begin absorbing the nutrients. The fatty acids, the vitamin E, the antioxidants, they start working from the inside out. That means less friction, better protection, and deeper hydration during activity. It's a small shift, but physiologically it makes all the difference. For extended sessions, I always tell men to keep the bottle nearby and reapply every 20 to 30 minutes. This isn't about overdoing it. This is about preventing dryness before it happens. Prevention is always easier than repairing irritation afterward. When men follow this simple rule, the micro tears and sensitivity crashes I see so often simply don't happen. And for men focused on sensitivity restoration, I recommend something even more targeted, combining sweet almond oil with a few drops of vitamin E oil from a capsule. I've seen this mixture revive nerve responsiveness in ways many patients didn't think were possible. It's gentle, it's nourishing, and it supports the exact biological system sensitivity depends on. But no matter how beneficial these oils are, I always give men the same important reminder: do not use them with latex condoms. Natural oils break down latex far faster than most men expect, and that can lead to failure. Polyurethane or polyisoprene condoms are safe alternatives, but latex is not. And I make sure to emphasize hygiene too. Always wash before and after. Oils can trap bacteria if you're not careful, especially in warm, moist areas. Finally, storage matters more than most men realize. Oils that smell sour, look cloudy, or change texture are oxidized. Rancid oils irritate the tissue instead of healing it. A cool, dark place is all you need, but it keeps the oils potent and safe for months. And when men follow these simple, science-backed steps, the difference is undeniable. Their skin stops feeling strained or fragile. The tissue becomes supple again, sensation returns, blood flow improves, and activity, that once felt uncomfortable become smooth, natural, and enjoyable again. But there's still one more truth you need to hear, and it's the part that ties all of this together, the long-term changes. Because what happens after weeks of consistent use is far more powerful than what happens on day one. The next section is where you finally understand what these oils can do for you over time and why so many men experience a level of improvement they didn't think was possible at their age. And this is the part most men underestimate, not because it's complicated, but because it requires something very few of them have ever done before: consistency. When a patient looks at me and says, "Will this actually work for me?" I always answer the same way. Not if you treat it like a one-time product, but if you treat it like care, real long-term care, the results can be remarkable. And I've watched those results unfold again and again in my clinic, because when the skin finally receives the fatty acids, antioxidants, and vitamins it has been missing for years, it doesn't just feel different, it behaves differently. The texture changes, the elasticity returns, the dryness softens, and the micro irritations that once caused discomfort begin to fade. It's a quiet transformation, subtle at first, then suddenly undeniable. Men often tell me the first change they notice is comfort. The skin stops feeling tight or fragile, and activity that once felt abrasive becomes smooth again. Then comes recovery. Instead of feeling sore the next day, the tissue feels normal, sometimes even better than before. And when recovery improves, men participate without fear, without hesitation, without mentally preparing themselves for discomfort that no longer arrives. But the most powerful changes appear in the deeper layers, especially in the vessels and nerves. Improved microcirculation means stronger responsiveness. Reinforced vessel walls mean better pressure retention. And when nerves stop fighting inflammation and finally receive nourishment, their signals sharpen. I've had men who felt blunted for years suddenly tell me it feels clearer, more alive. And there's nothing imaginary about that biologically. That's exactly what should happen when nerves regain proper conductance. And here's something I've learned from watching hundreds of patients over the years. These improvements compound. Week 1 feels different. Week 2 feels better. Week 3 feels like progress. And by week 4, men often look at me with this mix of relief and surprise because they didn't expect the tissue to respond this well at their age. One patient, a 62-year-old man who had struggled with thinning and irritation for almost a decade, described it perfectly. He said, "It feels like everything has been slowly waking up, not suddenly, but steadily." And that's the beauty of natural oils. They don't force the body, they support it. They give the tissue what it has been asking for silently year after year. But I also want to be honest, men who stop after a week miss the real transformation. It's the consistency, the daily or near daily application that allows the benefits to compound. In dermatology, we see this pattern. Constantly nourished skin heals, faster responds quicker, and maintains strength longer. And that's exactly what happens here. The other long-term benefit men rarely expect is protection, because every session with proper lubrication prevents the micro damage that would otherwise accumulate. It's not just about feeling better, it's about aging better. Preserving tissue health now means avoiding more serious issues later: chronic sensitivity loss, irritation cycles, and in some cases, even early signs of Peyronie-like plaque formation. Prevention may not feel dramatic, but for long-term health, it's everything. And yet, even with all these benefits, there's still one more factor that can make or break your result safety. Because natural oils are powerful, but only when used correctly. And there are a few safety rules men absolutely must understand before using them long-term. This next part is critical because it ensures you get all the benefits without any of the risks. Don't skip it. And before you rush out and buy a bottle of anything I've mentioned, there's one more part we absolutely need to talk about, because even the best oils can cause problems if you ignore a few critical safety rules. In fact, this is the part I spend the most time explaining in my clinic, not because men are careless, but because nobody ever teaches them how to safely care for intimate skin in the first place. And once you understand these precautions, everything becomes smoother, safer, and far more effective. The first rule I give every patient is simple: always test the oil on your forearm first. Your genital skin is far more sensitive than the rest of your body, so what works perfectly on your arms or legs might feel very different in more delicate areas. A 24-hour patch test may sound unnecessary, but I've seen enough reactions from mild redness to full irritation to know it's worth the extra day of patience. If the skin stays calm, you're good to go. The second rule, and this one surprises a lot of men, is about condoms. Natural oils break down latex at a chemical level far faster than men expect. I've seen cases where a condom deteriorated in under a minute simply because a man didn't know oils weaken latex fibers. If you need protection, switch to polyurethane or polyisoprene condoms. They're completely compatible with oils. Latex is not. I can't stress this enough. Then comes hygiene, something many men overlook. Oils can trap bacteria if you're not careful, not because the oils are dirty, but because warm, moist environments allow bacteria to multiply quickly. I always tell patients clean the area before and after use, not aggressively, not harshly, just enough to prevent buildup. Your skin will stay healthier, calmer, and far less reactive. Another part of safety that catches men off guard is rancidity. Oils don't last forever. If an oil smells sour, looks cloudy, or feels sticky in a way it didn't before it's oxidizing, rancid oils don't nourish, they irritate. I've seen men unknowingly use spoiled oils for months, wondering why their sensitivity kept declining. A cool, dark storage space solves this easily. Good oil is golden, bad oil is harmful, and then we come to essential oils. Lavender, peppermint, tea tree. These can offer benefits, but they're extremely potent. I've seen men make the mistake of adding several drops, and the result was immediate irritation. Essential oils are never meant to be applied directly to intimate skin. If you add them at all, it should be 1 drop per tablespoon of carrier oil. No exceptions. There's also a category of men I remind to be extra cautious. Those with eczema, those with very reactive skin, those who've had fungal or bacterial issues in the past, those prone to ingrown hairs or folliculitis. These men can still use natural oils, but they need to start, slowly observe carefully, and choose the gentler oils like jojoba or grapeseed before trying richer ones. And perhaps the most important safety reminder I give, one that often surprises men, is that natural oils may help soothe mild irritation, but they are not a treatment for medical infections or serious conditions. If a man sees persistent redness, pain, swelling, discharge, unusual curvature, or sudden changes in shape or sensitivity, he needs medical evaluation, not more oil. I've had patients delay necessary treatment because they assumed oil would fix everything. Oils support. They don't replace medical care, but when men combine smart choices with safe practices, the results are powerful. Their skin stays healthier, their comfort stays stable, their confidence returns. They not only improve their present experience, they protect their long-term intimate health. And with all of this in mind, there's one final message I always leave my patients with, the part that ties everything together and shows exactly why this simple habit can reshape their daily comfort, their confidence, and their long-term quality of life. That's what I want to share with you in the conclusion, so don't miss it. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from this entire video, it's this. Your intimate health doesn't decline because you've done something wrong. It declines because no one ever taught you how to care for this part of your body as you age. What we did today wasn't just talk about oils. We talked about restoring the confidence, comfort, and responsiveness that time slowly takes away without warning. You now understand what actually happens to the skin, the nerves, and the blood vessels after 50. You know why commercial lubricants often make things worse? And you've learned how the right natural oil, used the right way, can support your tissue, protect it, nourish it, and in many cases help you feel things you thought you had lost for good. This is about giving your body the care it has been silently asking for, maybe for years. And I want you to remember, this small, consistent daily care creates big, long-term change. I've watched men in their 50s, 60s, even 70s rebuild sensitivity, reduce irritation, improve firmness, and restore a sense of youthful responsiveness, not through medication, not through, extreme treatments, but through understanding their body and treating it with respect. If you're here listening to me right now, it tells me you care about your health, and trust me, that already puts you ahead of most men your age. You deserve comfort. You deserve confidence, and you deserve to feel at home in your own body again. Before you go do something for your future self, save this video so you can come back to the steps anytime you need them. And if you want more clear, science-backed guidance on men's health, aging hormones, sensitivity, and everything that keeps you strong and vibrant as you get older, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. I'm releasing new evidence-based tips every week to help you stay healthy, confident, and informed. And I'd love to hear from you too. What part of today's video surprised you the most? Or if you have a question you want me to cover in a future episode, just tell me in the comments. I read them, and I truly care about helping you understand your body better. Thank you for being here with me today. Take care of yourself because you're worth the effort, and I'll see you in the next video.